Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining. This is Michelle Savage with XBRL US, and you are here for our webinar, The FERC, How Regulators Use Technology to Improve Efficiency. So we're very excited to have with us today two great speakers, Campbell Pride, who you all know very well. Campbell is President and CEO of XBRL US. And then we have Rob Hudson. Rob is Energy Industry Analyst at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in the Office of Enforcement. And for today's session, I just want to go through a few logistical points. If anyone has any technical issues with seeing the live stream or actually listening, please send us an email at support, SUPPORT, at xbrl.us. And also, as we go through the presentation, please feel free to post questions by clicking on the little Q&A link that you see on your console. You can post your question there, and we'll get to those probably towards the end of the presentation. So for our agenda today, we're first going to kick off with a presentation by Rob about his experiences at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in implementing the XBRL data standard to modernize their systems. We're then going to go to a discussion between Campbell and Rob, and then finally, Campbell is going to give a demonstration of an application called Zool, which is used by the FERC and also by other regulators to improve access to XBRL data and for things like rendering and data validation rules. So with that, I want to turn it over to Rob. And Rob, if you want to share your camera and share your screen and take us through your presentation. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rob Hudson. I work at FERC, and I helped run the eForms program there. Let me get this up. Does that look good, everybody?
Looks great. Thank you.
There we go. Okay, let's start at the beginning. So I'm Rob Hudson. I'm an energy industry analyst in the divisions of audits and accounting in the Office of Enforcement at FERC. We have a usual disclaimer. The views expressed in this presentation are those of mine, and they don't necessarily reflect the views of FERC or its chairman or any individual commissioner. I'm just going to jump into it and give you a little background about the eForms project, when it started and things like that, and when I started at FERC, and there's a reason for all this. So the timeline is on the left, but I began working at FERC in 2014 and was given this project on top of all of the other duties I was specifically hired for. It's doing, energy analysis and other things. And at the time, we and the reason I say that is because I think it's important for people who are starting off on projects, at least managers, to consider the FTEs involved for a large project like this that upgrades data and renders it as we did, or converts it from old systems to new systems, and develops their own validation rules and other standards to go along with it. When we started this, we were kind of new. We were obviously new to XBRL, but writing some energy standards was new, and I know that a lot of them have been adopted, and coming up with some of those the formats and the formulas for a lot of the accounting, because we have our own accounting rules. We don't really go by GAAP. Was a lot of work. So the type of project that we have here with eForms is, it's not a project that you want to give to somebody that already has a full workload. And I think it's important to also, but to give this project to somebody who understands the office capabilities and not just the CIO's thing, the perspective of IT. Because yes, this is an IT upgrade, but the purpose and why we selected XBRL is so program offices can do things a little bit more. We have a lot more hand in changing things without going through a huge CIO expense or things like that, we can change different things about XBRL. So those are our reasons. We adopted it because it's freely available, open global standard. We also chose it, and I know we're going to talk about this later, over custom XML because there was a lot of efficiencies to gain in adopting XBRL and a lot of cost savings. And then, we relied on our, larger agency partners, the SEC and the FDIC, who already had XBRL collections in place. And we learned from their experience and made some different choices for our system, which I think paid off in the end. So we did have a lot of challenges from the beginning. A lot of them were in education at the beginning, and I think that XBRL has moved away from being considered only for financial information. But when we started this project back in 2014, 2015, a lot of people thought that XBRL, because they only knew it for GAAP, was only for financial information. And the forms that we collect in XBRL also contain operational data for each of the industries that FERC covers, which is electric, natural gas, and oil pipelines. We also, of course, had, as many agencies do, many external organizations and associations that we needed to have lots of conversations with about what their experience was with XBRL, mostly in the SEC area, in filing their 10Ks and things like that, and what they thought worked, what didn't work, and to bring those into our implementation of this. Another big thing was we needed to kind of rethink the document mindset. And from what I mean by that is that these forms were physical forms. Years ago, people typed in their answers on these forms and sent them to FERC. We upgraded from a system that was Visual Fox Pro, which is essentially an old version of a PDF, is kind of what it looks like. It's a form on a screen, and it sends the data in DBF files. That's how they were saved, and people saw that they were filling out a form, and we needed to kind of move away from that mindset that they were submitting forms and that they were submitting data. We're still in a transition phase. We don't, in fact, we know that there are a lot of vendors that provide forms for their customers who file this information, and so they can see it on the screen. So that's why we developed rendering code and other things that help people still visualize it. But regulators are accustomed to document-centric thinking, and we're trying to move away from that a little bit with this project. Specifically, we had to think a lot about how complex these forms were. Some of these forms are 80 pages long, and the filings can be over 200 pages. So they're massive. There's over 10,000 elements across 10 different forms. And people still referred to items on the page by their column and line number, and in even legal filings that were filed with the commission. So breaking that is something we're still trying to do, or gently push people away from it is probably a better way to say it. Because with the flexibility of XBRL and our rendering code, the places where this information can change from quarter to quarter, year to year, company to company. So it's hard to think in those terms once we've upgraded this to an XBRL system. Our legacy system, the VFP system, I don't know if many people on the call have worked in Visual Fox Pro, but it was really terrible. It was poor. I'm sure at the time it was an excellent solution, but over the years, instead of upgrading the forms to collect new data, they just put in information about footnotes. They would, if you needed more information about a certain number that was reported, the instruction would change and information would then be added in a footnote. And our goal with this project was to move all of the data that was being collected in footnotes into fields so people could really understand it, search for it, do analysis on it, and it would be, structured. The other thing that we really had to consider at the beginning was filing solutions. And so we have many different sizes of companies that file these information. We wanted to break away from providing software to filers, which is what VFP is. It's a software application that FERC provided to the filers to submit their forms, and give the freedom for each filer to find a solution that works for them. There was a bit of financial burden involved in this because vendors came into the marketplace, and so you have the platinum standard, and then you have, the basic options to file, and you can even file with Excel spreadsheets. So we wanted to just create the rules around what has to come in the door and provide all the tools for the system that we use in a public way. So vendors can come in and provide different levels of support, different levels of software for different size, different filing companies. We also, we needed to assess how the staff needs to access the data. Fortunately, or unfortunately, at the time, there wasn't much data being pulled from the Visual FoxPro databases. And so internally, it was not a big lift for us to understand how people would use this data. We just knew that it would be better and that new opportunities would present themselves as more people got familiar with accessing the XBRL data, pulling their own tables, creating views and different dashboards that automatically update with this data. Externally, we kept things the same. The forms are rendered in HTML. They're put into our e-library, and you are able to download each one of those forms. The other thing that we also enabled was you're able to download the actual submission file from each company. We have an RSS feed that publishes every accepted filing. So data companies or anyone who wants to build the exact same database that we have within FERC that we use can subscribe to the RSS feed, pull in the instance submissions, the instance documents, the XBRL submissions, and create their own XBRL database. And it could be auto-updating or however they'd like to do it. And we thought that that was an important thing for transparency's sake, because we are internally moving towards another platform, data.ferc.gov. At some point, I know that our CDO office is working on it to incorporate all of FERC's public data. And we were a bit of ahead of that. So we wanted to make the data available as quickly as possible. Going on to the next page, the benefits of XBRL for eForms. So this is, I assume a lot of people are fairly familiar with the benefits of XBRL generally. But when we've converted from Visual FoxPro, where we provided a filing solution, now any filer or vendor, they can build their own system. They can submit filings directly to FERC. They can serve FERC filers as customers. There's another marketplace. This enabled a lot more data quality checking that could be done on the filer side through those programs, because we publish our validation rules, which are written in Zool, which Campbell will show later. We publish our exact code for that. And so they can run in a vendor software program or on a filer's computer to check to make sure balance sheets balance. Not an accountant, but that has been ingrained in me that that's something that was necessary to do with this system. It also allows us to change things easier when reporting requirements change, instructions or validation rules needs to change. We have internally software applications that we use that can affect the taxonomy, publish a new version, can change the validation rules, and schedule them for when they need to go out. And we can accept filings based on previous rules of a date and time at any time. So let's say that we change the taxonomy 3 times over the last 3 years. If you're using the first taxonomy, you can still submit according to the first taxonomy and the first taxonomy rules, and it's static. It's always going to be there. But if you're coming in, with a current filing, you're using the current version. So we have different versions of taxonomies, different versions of validation rules, different rendering code based on the time it was published. The rest of this is kind of basic stuff, and I know that probably the discussion is where most people really want to talk about it, but I want to talk about some lessons that we did learn. Concrete business rules may be challenging to oppose initially. So moving from unstructured, our visual Foxborough, to structured data, we found out that upon implementation, there were many different interpretations of those instructions. We had different large filers who were for years filing data and thought that and were under the impression that they were filing it correctly, and they were filing it correctly because FERC hadn't come out to say, do it this way, but we had to make those decisions. So there's a lot of talk with some companies about how this is how we want you to file this data because it makes it easy to compare to all of the other filers of this data. So zeroing in on the interpretation of the instructions was a big deal in the beginning. And honestly, you just have to roll with it. There's no way to ensure that you capture everything in the instructions, but it's necessary to build in the time and the resources to answer those questions with your accountants for us, or with your operations people for FERC, so they can explain that this is the preferred way of filing, and this is why the rules are as they are now, and why you're hitting a validation error when you're trying to submit something to FERC, or when you're working in the vendors program who's copied our validation rules. It's also really important to involve all the stakeholders in planning in the beginning and the implementation process. Needs to be a large, robust training about the maintenance of the system. How often is it going to be updated? How many updates a year do you think is going to happen? Things like that. We had these conversations. In the beginning, there were a lot of bugs we had to crush and had to fix a lot of things up front. And then a big thing is you need to find the people who use the old system and see if they're willing and able to learn how to pull data out of a new system. And this is really important because regardless of if they're looking at it in a printed out PDF, there's better ways to do it. And getting that training from the beginning and the buy-in and convincing your staff that this is a necessary function for them going forward because technology upgrades is really helpful. We have a lot of very, very advanced power users, way beyond my understanding of pulling data out of the taxonomy and the database and everything like that. And then we have basic users just want to pull a simple table of profit and loss. And all of that is possible with the tools that we have internally. The other thing that's important is those users of the data, we didn't do as great of a job as this as I wanted to. And we've learned from our mistakes. You need to create custom solutions for those for FERC agency users, for your users of the data internally, so their work can continue seamlessly from the old system to the new system. And those need to be available on day one, if not before day one, because you don't want anyone to have to learn something different when a new system goes up that isn't ready to. It's that our VFP system was decades old, and we had many people with different spreadsheets that would pull data in, and there were workarounds, and we had to Excel spreadsheets and access databases that would access this data. And trying to get all of those resolved was very important to us. We got a lot of them right, and we got several of them wrong. But assessing how and things are used from the beginning is a real necessary thing, and build that into your project. And that goes to say is that, internal staff has varying levels of technical knowledge or willingness. So these tools in education must reach all levels of people. And that's where being flexible and adaptable, because you're dealing with people trying to learn new systems. And I think we're at a great place at FERC now internally. It was stressful when we first launched this system. But I'm very pleased with how professional and how smart the rest of our FERC staff is at learning how to get to this information. We have, this is just future plans and opportunities. We have an annual update cycle for our current e-forms, which are 10 different forms, and we can talk about them specifically at another time. But, every year we update things. We put out a draft of the taxonomies, the rules, and anything else, usually around mid-November. Sometime to the end of the year, we give filers, mostly vendors, a time to comment on any code changes that they see could be problematic, may not work with their system. We use a commenting software package that is open to the public. Anyone can comment on our code. And then we publish a new, the new version of the taxonomy, usually at the end of March, and give people another 2 months before it's actually implemented for the first Q1 filings that are due. We're working on Order 898 right now, implementing some new accounting changes to the forms, specifically about certain renewable energy assets. And then my team, my smallest, the branch that I'm in, has issued a notice of proposed rulemaking for our electric quarterly reports, which the rulemaking notes that we're planning to implement XBRL CSV for that, which is a different incarnation of XBRL. Instead of an XBRL XML, we're doing CSV files, because this is time series data of sales in energy markets across the country. And I'm happy to answer questions about all of those that I can. And I think that's all I have, Michelle.
Great, Rob, thanks very much. I think you can stop sharing your screen now. And Campbell, if you want to put your camera on, and we're going to go to the Q&A portion here.
Right. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Rob. So we have a few questions here for you, Rob, and you probably covered some of these things, but maybe we should just go into a little bit more detail on them. So the first question we had was, when FERC first began its modernization project, it started with an XML program. And that they started to go down the path of that, I believe. And eventually the commission switched to XBRL. So I'd be interested to know, what issues did you encounter with the XML project? And what did the commission gain from moving to XBRL?
So yeah, we started with XML, custom XML solution, because that's what we had done in the past with all of our other collections. Everything, it wasn't adhering to any sort of standard other than the ones that we would create. And honestly, the more I looked into XBRL, the more I talked with other experts in the SEC and things like that. XBRL answered a lot of the questions already about how to deal with liabilities. Is it a negative? Is it a positive in an account? How do you deal with time on a field and things like that? So all of the tons of questions that we would have had to answer in a custom XML implementation of this were already answered in XBRL. And it provided us also the flexibility to adding our own standards to it, our own rules and other things on top of it, which, so it just kind of pushed the project months forward by being able to adopt XBRL.
Okay, great. Thank you. The second question we've got here is, what might you do differently? You talk about some of the problems, but what might you do differently today if you were starting the project again?
I think a lot of it, I think the answer to that is, there would be training would have started a lot earlier internally on XBRL resources and how to access data. Given we wouldn't have had a data set ready, but I think that explaining a taxonomy in advance, giving people sample projects to do on data sets that are tied to a taxonomy, being able to pull information, developing the tools that help them pull the information earlier than we did is what I would have changed about this project. I think everything else went fairly well, but the 0 to 60 that it was necessary to do when we launched this about learning how to pull the data, getting the tools available to pull the data, can be avoided and will be in the next incarnation of whatever we upgrade next.
Okay, great. So now that you're a couple of years into the program, has the project met your original expectations?
Yes, it's shocking the precipitous drop of questions that we receive on this system, on XBRL, on the eForm system, on the requirements, on how to send in data and things like that. And I think that that's in line with our choice to make all of our tools, all of our code, except for, of course, some security measures, public. The taxonomy is always going to be public, but our validation rules are public. Our rendering code is public. Our source code for our validation rules is also public. It's not just the compiled versions. And so I do think that it's met our expectations in that the public is satisfied with filing. The public can get the information easily. The data resources that are available to download the information are not the best yet. We're moving in that direction. But I do think the consistency and the quality of the data is leaps and bounds ahead of where it was before because of our very high validation rules. We are able to make changes to the reporting requirements very quickly if there's a problem. Fortunately, we've gotten past a lot of the bugs, so we don't have to do those changes. Don't have to make those quick fixes anymore. So we're on that annual update cycle, but we can do it easier. And internally, I mentioned how we have master users that understand taxonomies a lot more than I do and how to pull specifically from these data sets. And they can create amazing visualizations and a lot of other things.
Okay, great. So just if you were to compare this project to other FERC technology projects, just in terms of cost, timing, and resources required, the things that are not using XBRL, what were the kind of the advantages and disadvantages?
So I haven't been involved in any of the other upgrades of a system like this in the commission, or a creation of another data source that the commission is using. As I said, we are working on EQR, and when the commission decides to move forward with that, and that will be my only other touch point. But I do know that we delivered this project on time and on budget. I mean, given there were some renegotiations, there were some optional contract line item numbers that we decided to exercise earlier. We added other projects to this, like the renewables order that I mentioned, order 898 and things like that. So this was a glowing success for FERC, I think, because it didn't take more time and it wasn't much more expensive than was considered in the original spend.
Okay, great. A final question before we move on to the next section is that, so the eForms project relied on the XBRL standard, but also it uses a processing language called ZUL. And maybe you could just give us like a quick overview of how the FERC uses ZUL.
Yeah, so we use ZUL. We use ZUL for our validation code. And it's fantastic. There's a public plugin that XBRL US has put out there for VS Code that syncs with the taxonomy and other data resources. So it checks the code as it's going through. You can pull up other options and things like that. It's an excellent tool for what we need for our custom validation rules that aren't written in like a table link base or something like that within the taxonomy. We have other validation rules, and we thought it was easier to keep it separate. And so we did that. We also use what we call the FERC renderer. We're going to be upgrading to something called Zender, which is an open source other thing that will an open source HTML renderer that I know XBRL US has worked on and is putting out. We'll upgrade to that later in the year, which will be how we render things. And so those things work really well hand in hand, passing off element names and context and other things that are within the taxonomy and checking it as you go, which is really helpful when I'm in trying to program something, trying to code something.
All right, great. So I'm going to share my screen and just give everyone a bit of a rundown on what Zool is. So let me just share my screen. Give me 1 second here, and we can go through this. All right. Okay, so just how regular. So I'm just going to go through two parts of where Zool's being used, which Rob mentioned. The first was validation, and the second is rendering. So we talked about validation, and any submission made to the commission has to be validated. So there are a number of ways that FERC validations can be done against a filing. These are just some that I'm aware of, and we can just walk through these and explain what they mean, just so people kind of get the idea of how this works. So you can validate your filing on the FERC website. So the FERC has a website. When you make your submission, you can do a test submission, and that will, when you do that submission, it will validate your filing and then give you a list of errors back in Excel, I think. And so you can use that to validate your filing, and then it basically each rule has a message, and we'll look at those in a minute, and you can validate, and you can then go back once you've got those validation messages, you can go and correct the filing. Most vendor software will incorporate these validation rules into it. So if you're using a vendor provided solution, they incorporate these rules, and so then you can run the rules when you validate your filing as well with the new vendor software. We've also made the validation rules available on our website, and so you can run it there. You can actually we also made an Excel add-in available. And a Google add-in, so you can validate both in Excel and in Google Sheets if you want to, and get your results back in Excel there. If you want to check it before you submit it to the FERC website, or if your vendor software doesn't support it, you can use those. You can also, if you want to get really technical, you can use the RL command line to do it, and there's also an RL GUI tool which you can use. Now, RL is a standardized software that is a software that's used by the SEC and a bunch of regulators around the world, which supports the Zool language. And you can also run it, I haven't put it here, but you can also run it in our Altova's tool as well, XML Spy. So there's a number of different ways you can run these validation rules, and to basically with your filing. So just go through those quickly. So this is just so you know where it is, and this is on the eCollection site. You can run the validation, and this is, if you're a filer, you'll be well aware of this. This is the eCollections website, and you can just do a test filing, load your filing up, and then you can run it. You can also run it on the XBRL US website, and you can validate it there. So I'll just show you quickly how that works. So this is, we have on our website some reporting tools. So we have a number of options here. You can validate before you file. You can choose your filing. I'm just going to do a Form 3Q. I put a mistake in here, so it'll give you some errors, and then you can just run check filing, and this will go off. And what this is doing, it's submitting the form or the XML file to our server, and it's basically running those validation rules. So just while that'll just run away, and we'll get results back in a second. So you can run it here. You can also run it. There is an Excel plugin. If you haven't seen this, you can also use the Excel plugin to validate your rules. So that is, I'll show you how that works. There is Excel has add-ins that you can go and use. This is a free add-in. You can add this XBRL file data add-in. This allows you to basically validate your filing using the latest FERC rules, but it also means you can also pull FERC submissions, and you can pull data that's been submitted to the file to the commission back to your back in an Excel format as well. So it has a bunch of functionality incorporated in it, but just showing you how this works. So this one I've chosen the same quarterly file, and I've run the FERC validations for 2024. Then you can check the filing and it'll pull the results back. I pre-ran this, and there's 1,006 errors in this filing. I changed the currency from US dollars to New Zealand dollars, but it just shows you how this works. And it gives you the rule message for F1 or 2 is the rule. And it's basically telling you you've reported this value in New Zealand dollars, and saying all monetary unit types should be well, for this element should be in US dollars, and it's going to give you a bunch of errors there. And you get the same thing. I ran this just against the website, and this is giving you the same message again for all the errors in the filing. So you can run, obviously you're not going to have, you'd hope you don't get this many errors. I kind of did like a wholesale change just so you can see how this works. So you can do it there, but you can also do it. We have also a plugin, same plugin, but that works in Google Sheets. If you don't like Excel, you can do it in Google Sheets as well. And you can take any filing you're about to submit, a filing that's already been submitted, and you can run these validation rules using that. You can also validate, all of these are working with API. You can validate this. We have an API that we make available. So you can run Excel, Google, the website, that's what ours runs, but anyone else could, they could add their own website, and then you can call the API, and then the Zool server will just basically give you the results back. Just so you know, Zool is an open source code that's available from our website. You can download it. You don't have to pay anything for it. So all of that software is available. If you want to set it up, then you can run it yourself. And this is just the API, just showing you how that works. You can also run it on the command line. So you can, if you download the REL software, you can then basically, if you're familiar with terminal or with the command line in Windows environment, you can also run that as well. And on our website, we have a listing of all the commands you can run and how you run them. So this gives you more granularity. If you want, you can run, if you know what the rules, specific rules, you can run those. You can get rule statistics about which rules ran and how many results they did and how many passed and how many failed. You can say, run these rules, except these ones, which may not be a problem. And then you can turn those results in XML or JSON. So it gives you quite a bit of flexibility in terms of how you run those. So this is an example of so you can find it. I ran one of these earlier. Can't find where I ran it. So I ran this rule, the same rule we ran, and this is just the command line. You can get back statistics, so you can see every rule that runs, how many rules ran, how many failed, etc. So if we look at the rule that we got, this one that we just ran before, you can see we had we ran 1,000, and it ran 1,007 times, and there are 1,006 errors on that rule. So you can, but this is for the entire filing. It's showing you all the rules that ran. This particular rule, how long it took to run. This took 3 seconds. It checked 1,435 values, and 1,434 of them were okay. So this is running the command line. It gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can do. So that's the validation rules. If you want to run them, you can either do it on the website in Google and Microsoft Excel, or you can download the REL software from rel.org, and you can run that, and you can run those rules. So there's a lot of options around how you can run them. And on our website, on XBRL US website, you can download the Zool manual, and it basically gives you a lot of details about about how that language works. All right, so moving on, rendering. So when a filing is made to the commission, it's made in currently made in an XML format, and that could, that's just what they've chosen to use. But when that XML file is received by the commission, they basically take it and they database it, and they run the validation rules. And then they also create a human readable version of that form, which they render. But that rendering process is also made publicly available, so you can render that filing before you file it with the commission, and you can check it, and it puts it in a format that you're familiar with, which is the traditional form that you're used to seeing. Now, this form that is generated when they render it is what's something called inline XBRL. So it's not generating a PDF, it's actually creating an HTML document. And that HTML document has all of the XBRL information embedded in it. And we'll have a look at that in a second. And if you want to render one of these filings, you can do that on the FERC website. You can go to the FERC website, you can do a test filing, and then that'll create a rendered version for you that you could look at and review. You can run it from our website as well, and I'll show you that in a minute. You can also use the REL command line, or you can use vendor software as well. Most vendor software will create a rendered version of it, and a number of them will also allow you to save it as a PDF as well. So, these are the four options you really have if you want to see the rendering. We made it available on our website because we thought it made it easier if people wanted to do that. And that was this other, and I pre-ran one before. So this is the same file. You can choose the filing here. You can bring up this was the quarterly filing, open that. And then you pick what form you want to run. You could take a form 1 and you can see what it looks like as a form 1Q if you want, but basically you can pull that up and it gives you a number of options. You can, when that file is generated, you can put the CSS formatting of that HTML into the file itself, or you can have it generated as a separate file, and then you can submit it and generate it. Before I got on the call, I just ran this, and this is just showing you, gives you messages back on how it's processing, and that will then generate a form like this. So this is just like the form 1Q. This just gets generated by running that rendering process. This is just in a standard browser, but if you were to open it in an inline browser, you get a lot more information about those facts. So if you look at the underneath these numbers embedded in here is information about the underlying XBRL. So you can see in here, this is the element, its utility plant, net. This is the tag that's associated with it. It's infinite decimals in this case, and it's got a unit ref. This means this actually refers to the unit. This actually is in New Zealand dollars because they didn't fix it. But this just shows you what it looks like, and you can if you want to render these, you can render these from the website here, but then you can also render them via the command line of a REL as well if you want to. So these are the kind of the options you have around validation. So you can, around validation and rendering. And this is the rendering site, and this is kind of like the command line that it looks like. Now, that was rendered with the Zender, which Rob mentioned earlier, that everyone's at the moment supporting the FERC renderer, but that's going to be updated to Zender, and it's pretty much the same. The only difference is that it allows you to, it's faster. It will do the rendering a lot faster than it was in the past, and we're trying to support taking XML files and basically be able to put them into an inline format, so you can look at the data and review the data in a much more human readable way. And Zender will also allow you to be able to generate much larger filings. Like, for example, the Form 1's a large filing, but Zender will then support even larger filings. So if you're going to do a program and you have a lot of preset forms you want to create, and you want to view those in an inline XBRL format, then Zender can be used to do that, and do that in a timely manner. So that's all I had on that. So maybe we can go back and we've got a little bit of time left. And I think we had, let me stop sharing. And I think we were going to talk a little bit about the FDTA, and I was going to ask a question for you, Rob, on this.
Yeah, so FERC is not under the FDTA. We are monitoring it. We hope to watch what the financial regulators do and possibly implement the same type of strategy that comes out of those rulemakings from each one of those agencies. But you know, I think Michelle and you've asked me to discuss what they could gain from data standards. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. It's very interoperable. You can connect it with other systems. I think that having use of a common identifier like LEI or something similar is also something that would be highly recommended, so you can easily track companies from one financial regulator to the other, and possibly to FERC at some point, to see where their holdings are, what kind of business they're doing, where they're located, and their phone number, everything like that. The big suggestion that I give to any agency, any company that's or small municipality considering upgrading to XBRL is definitely about the time and the workload, and making sure that you really assess all of your staff's needs ahead of time. Once you put the data out there in XBRL, there is a large community that is going to really support it, which we have found to be excellent. There are lots of data companies that are ingesting this information, running AI type tools on it, and creating public dashboards for all of these things that do. They are for-profit companies, of course, to do these things. But internally, I think is where people need to concentrate, where the agencies need to concentrate in these upgrades, is making sure that your regular workload isn't dropped. Your weekly reports can, on the day that you switch to a new system, are supported in the new system. Those are the things that are required for the government to continue running on time and continuing serving its mandate. That's where I think people should really concentrate in the FDTA once they get the decisions made about what structured data they're going to use, and other type of identifiers, and all of the other very big details that they're trying to work out in those interagency committees.
Great, Rob, thanks very much. I'm going to come on screen now, and we're just going to take a few questions from the audience. So the first question we got is on the EQR modernization, is there an expected time frame for the next update?
So we received all the comments, and I know that staff is looking through the comments, and I can't make any suggestion or I can't give a timeline on when the chairman or the commissioners will act, or if they'll act on a final rule. I can only say that personally, I think it should be sooner than later, but I think it's a very needed upgrade that should be coming. I think people will be very happy with the decisions that are made and how to do it. But I can't really comment on a timeline. I can't predict what the 11th floor would do based on, well, there's so many things. So based on politics, based on there are other priorities within the commission and things like that. But it will come out in a commission meeting or a commission vote if they choose to take it up.
Great, thank you. The next question is, I'm not sure if you can answer this one, but does the transition to XBRL apply to past filings? If so, does it overlap with the Public Utility Data Liberation or PUDL project? Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with the PUDL project. So our transition to XBRL was for all of FERC's Visual Fox Pro forms. Specifically, that's the Form 1, Form 2, Form 6, Form 60, and Form 714. And several of those have quarterly forms, and some of them have smaller forms for smaller, filers and things like that. So those are the only things that were upgraded, that have been upgraded currently at FERC from into XBRL. I don't know, and it does apply to all past filings. So any submission for any sort of past filing has to be done in XBRL now. And we set a basic taxonomy rule set at the beginning. So if people need to correct like a 1999 Form 1, Form 6, it has to be done in XBRL. We do not have the Visual Foxborough system up anymore to accept refilings of that.
Okay, great, thank you. And here's a question. I think this may be for Campbell. Is Zender expected to be backwards compatible for prior versions of the FERC taxonomy?
Yeah, so Zender at the moment, what we've been working on is having it compatible with the 2024 taxonomy. It's compatible with all taxonomies. It's just a matter of creating the templates for them. We've developed a process so we can automatically update the templates for FERC. So if we need them for prior, then yeah, we can support that. It's just a matter of just creating them. But Zender will work with all taxonomies. It's taxonomy agnostic. On the previous question from about the Puddle project, I have actually aware of the Puddle project, and I have been talking to them, and I have been giving them, helping them transition to using the XBRL data. They had traditionally were used to seeing the data in the prior format, in the FoxPro format, and so for them, it's just a matter of giving them some training on XBRL and how they should be transitioning those data, how they should be taking the XBRL data and putting it back with the format they were used to. They kind of modeled it on the way that Visual FoxPro works. So, a lot of the data they had, they kind of, they weren't really expecting the extra detail, I don't think. So I think that's been useful to them. But there was a transition for them as well, because a lot of the formats they'd put it in kind of had mirrored the formats that Visual FoxPro was using.
Great, thank you. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have right now. If anyone has additional questions, they can post them in the link. But in the meantime, I want to, thank our speakers so much today. Rob, that was terrific, really helpful, giving us insights into your project. Campbell, thank you for the demo on Zool. And I'm going to share my screen just quickly here. And thank you all for attending. I did want to mention that we have an event coming up where actually you can meet Rob in person, because I think he's going to be there. We're hoping. He's been invited and we're still waiting for confirmation. But we have an event coming up on November 14th, which is going to take place in Washington, D.C. And as you can see here, it's called Digital Reporting for Measurable Results, Climate Corporate Government. And you can actually find out more about it by going to the link that you see in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. Essentially, the focus of our conference is going to be on digital reporting for climate data, for corporate data, for government data. And it's going to have a big focus on the Financial Data Transparency Act and also on the climate and sustainability related mandates that are happening around the world. So look forward to seeing everybody there. And thank you again for attending. And hopefully we'll see you at our next event. Thank you.